good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stream Miami. I am so thankful for all of you tuning in tonight, and for all of you that are here right now and actually tuned in and watching. Please share the video so that we can get our viewer count a little bit more up for this lovely lady who I just want to go ahead and start and dive in, start a conversation with her. I've known her for many, many years, and we have experienced a lot of ups and downs together. We appreciate each other very much because I know that we all share the same type of love. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you to the great Miss Alyson Thomas. Hi, Mama Bear.
Hi, Vegas. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful in this heat and excited to share my story.
Good. It's been horrible today. Well, this past couple of days here in Florida, at least in Miami, it's been terrible, the weather.
Absolutely.
Usually we have some kind of rain and it kind of, makes it a little bit more bearable, but it has been unbearable. I think we
Yes,
reached 96 today, something like that. It was something terrible.
that's right.
How are you doing with this whole situation about COVID-19 and everything that's been going on?
I'm very lucky and I've been very blessed that I've been able to go to work every single day through the pandemic. I'm considered an essential worker as I work in the medical industry. So I have been able to go to work all through the pandemic. And of course, I'm very careful to follow all the guidelines from the CDC. I make sure to wear my mask and wash my hands and use hand sanitizer. And I certainly hope that everybody listening and out there watching is doing the same, because it's no fun on a ventilator and we've lost way too many friends and family.
I agree. I agree. And not only that, but it just takes a little bit longer for everything to start getting back to some kind of normalcy. And at least on my case,
Right.
I've been stuck without being able to produce any type of events or being, without income since March. So the longer this process takes, then the worse it's going to be for some of us. So I just hope that, people are aware of that and that they have some kind of empathy and don't drown in selfishness when it comes to this situation. But Mama Bear,
Absolutely.
let's start sharing your story. Let's get back to the basics. And I want to be able to go and dive into our first segment of the evening. And are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Okay, so in this first segment, I just want you to tell me the basics about you. Who are you? Where are you from? Your favorite color, your favorite food, what's your favorite pastime? I want to know the basics of Alyson Thomas.
Well, I'm Alyson Thomas, also known as Mama Bear. I am originally from Brooklyn, New York. I live in beautiful, sunny Paradise, Hollywood, Florida, a suburb of Fort Lauderdale. My favorite color is purple, dark purple to be exact. My favorite thing to do is shoe shop. And my second favorite thing to do is to cook.
Really? You like to
I
cook?
love to cook. I can throw down.
That is so weird because I've never had any of your dishes.
That's right. Oh.
That's so strange. I'm learning this about you today.
There you go. That's what this is all about. Sharing and learning.
Yeah, but I'm a little upset because we we would see each other every day for years, and then
Yeah.
I just never had any of your cooking.
Well, it's funny. I used to bring Mike matzo ball soup every single week in a container in the daytime.
Oh, of course you will
He
bring him soup, but you're
absolutely
not
had
bringing
to
me
have
soup.
my he had to have my matzo ball soup.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. So you're Jewish.
Correct.
You were born into a Hasidic family. How
Correct.
strict was your upbringing, and how old were you when you realized that you were not like the other boys?
Well, it's easy for a lot of people to relate to the story on Netflix, Unorthodox, which is a story of a Jewish girl named Etsy or Esther, and her plight of getting away from the Hasidic life. My dad is from Williamsburg, the same suburb of Brooklyn where the series Unorthodox was filmed. And the Hasidic in Williamsburg are called Setmar Jews. They're Jews that come from Eastern Europe. And my mom was from Coney Island. That's actually where I was born. And when you're in a Hasidic family, you're ultra Orthodox, which means you follow every law of the Talmud or the Old Testament or the Bible. And your lifestyle is based on old world traditions. Nothing secular is accepted, no television, no colorful things that we see in life and take for granted, very little radio. Your whole life is focused around studies of the Talmud or the Bible, and a lot of family traditions. Most of your time is spent with family and with people like yourself. At the age of 5 years old, I started going to Hebrew school. And of course, when you go to Hebrew school, you're spending your entire childhood studying for your bar mitzvah. That's age 13 for boys, age 12 for girls. And at that time, all you do is study to prepare to have your bar or bat mitzvah. So your whole life is focused around studies of the Talmud as well as your regular school studies. I was bullied every single day that I went to school because I was tiny. I was very, very small. I was probably the smallest child in the school. And I had to walk through some pretty difficult neighborhoods in Brooklyn. So I was bullied every day going to school. But when I got to school, I tried to be the best student I could be.
Let me ask you something. I'm sorry, Mama Bear, but going back to your upbringing in the Hasidic community, is it just like? Let me ask like this: the Unorthodox, the Netflix or the series, does it kind of relate? And is it the upbringing, the Hasidic community? Is it just like that in New York City?
Exactly, 100%. In the Jewish religion, there are Hasidic Jews, and every Hasidic Jew is Orthodox, but there are Orthodox Jews that are not Hasidic. And what that means is if you're an Orthodox Jew, you follow the Talmud and you follow the traditions, but you don't wear the Hasidic clothing. The women don't have to shave their head and wear what's called a sheitel or a wig. They don't follow the customs as strictly as the Hasidim do. In the Hasidic community, everybody does the same thing 7 days a week. Your lifestyle is exactly the same in every household, in every community. And you observe the Sabbath Friday night and all day Saturday, and your whole life is based around prayer and time to worship God and to study and to just meditate and ask for comfort and ask for strength and ask for guidance in everything you do.
Until what age were you in this community?
In my particular case, at age 14 is when I had to beg and ask my parents to get out of Hebrew school and be able to go into public school. My parents, of course, their wish was for me to be a rabbi, as all Hasidic people believe that their sons should be rabbis and their daughters can study, but their daughters have to focus on marriage and children and family. That's the way it is. When I was young, you asked when I knew that I was different than the other boys. I was probably around 7 or so when I started realizing I would rather play with dolls and I would rather do things like my sisters are doing because that felt right for me. I was the only boy in my entire family for many, many, many years. I have 2 siblings, both older sisters. All of my cousins were all female. There was no boys. I was the only boy in the family for many years.
Did they notice this difference about you when you were, as a kid?
Yes, very much so, because I was called a sissy a lot. And my dad would always say, toughen up. You know what's right, you know what's wrong, you can't sin, because anything that wasn't typically masculine is considered a sin in the Hasidic life. So I was always pressured that I couldn't be with the girls. When the families would get together, the men are always in one area and the women are always in another. Even when you pray, the men are in one area, the women are in another. You're always separated. So my whole situation was, when the men would get together, I wanted to be in the kitchen with the women. I wanted to be with the girls. I didn't want to be with the men praying and talking about the Talmud. I wanted to be with the girls because that's where I felt comfortable. And every time I would go into the kitchen to be around my grandparents, my two grandmothers, my mother, my sisters, my aunts, I would always be told by my grandmothers, you got to go. This is wrong. You don't belong here. And the men would always try to pull me to their side, and they would try to say, oh, you need to toughen up. When we had recreation time, my uncles would try to teach me softball. My dad would try to take me to do different things with him, and I just never felt like that was right for me. So it was
So
very difficult.
yeah, I'm sure it must have been such a battle, because especially when you're, especially in the community, when you have to separate yourself, the females from the males,
Right.
it has to be so distinctive, and you just don't, it doesn't relate to you. It must have been so difficult. So you begged your parents to take you out of school at the age of 14 because of many reasons. I mean, you were being bullied to filth, and um and also, you couldn't just deal with the pressure of, the community itself. So how was that like?
Well, I have to backtrack just a little bit, and that's what, probably around age 12, 11 or 12, I started sneaking around, and I started putting on my mother's sheitel, or her wig. Hasidic women shave their heads so that they're not attractive to other men. So they wear a sheitel. And I would kind of sneak into my mother's room, get her wig. I would get my sister's clothing, and I would basically play dress up. I had no clue what I was doing or why I was doing it. It just felt right.
Right.
Well, then I started getting a little bolder, and I started sneaking out of the house, thinking I was a girl. I didn't know any different. Well, it didn't take long for my mom to realize that things were moved around, but she never said anything. I kind of think she knew that I was playing in her stuff, but to me, it was harmless. And by the time I was 14, I knew I did not want to follow the footsteps of my peers and go to Israel and become a rabbi and continue to study. So I asked my parents if I could go to public schools. My sisters had already migrated to public school, and they agreed. And I thought to myself, well, this will give me an opportunity to be with boys and girls and learn other things that I only saw when I was able to sneak and watch TV, because television was not allowed in our home. So luckily, my parents agreed to let me go to public school as long as I maintained my grades. Now, I was a typical nerd. I was very scared to do anything bad. So I studied and I kept my grades. But the bullying was just as bad in New York public schools as it was in Hebrew school.
I know that you had a
So I
problem with
now,
physical education or something like that.
yes, I did. The problem I had is when I got into middle school, you're required to take PE. And I was like petrified. I'm like, I can't go in a boys' locker room. I'm not taking my clothes off in front of boys. I can't do these things. So I got the first day or two when I had to go to physical education, I just would pretend to be sick. I tried every excuse in the world. Well, later on, maybe day 3 of PE, I went to my mom and I'm like, I can't do this. Everybody's laughing at me and I just don't want to go. So my mom was very understanding about it, and she went to the school with me, and I was allowed to take modern dance or ballet. It was only a girls' class at that time. We're going back many years. But I said to the teachers, and I said to my mom and to my dad, there's male ballerinas. I want to go to the Joffrey School. I want to be a ballerina. Oh, my dad went ballistic on that. He's like, there's no way my son is going to be a ballerina. And I kept saying, there's male ballerinas. And I kept showing them pictures. And going to, modern dance, I felt so wonderful because I was wearing tights and I was wearing toe shoes and I was learning ballet and I was learning modern dance and stretching. And it was so wonderful. And so then the boys made more fun of me because word got around the school. So now instead of getting bullied just by little Jewish boys, I'm getting bullied by Puerto Ricans and Black boys and Italian boys and all the boys from the neighborhood. And when I'd walk home, I would get beat up or I would get mugged for my 25 cents for my lunch or whatever the case was, but it was continuous. But my dad always said, you have to toughen up. And I'm thinking, I don't want to toughen up.
When was the time that you started flirting with boys and having intimacy with boys?
Well, I kind of knew that things were different and I just didn't understand why because I was very sheltered. So I really didn't understand what it meant. But probably age 14 or so, I started I had found a friend in my school who was more like me. He was also effeminate. He was also made fun of. So we kind of became friends. Like at lunchtime, we would sit together. And being Jewish, we had to bring our own food because my mother wouldn't allow me to eat the school food because it wasn't kosher. So I not only could eat the school food like everybody else, but I had to have a very bland lunch in a paper bag. So people made fun. A lot of the kids would steal that bag of lunch from me. So it was difficult. Anyway, I had this one friend. We were the same age. We kind of started hanging out together. And slowly over time, we got to kind of fondle each other and see what was going on down there. And it was kind of like, oh, this feels good. This feels right. But I was scared to do anything else. I mean, petrified. I didn't actually have a sexual encounter that you would consider a real sexual encounter until almost age 19. But by 16, I started realizing how to get around the boys and be able to have oral sex. So I was having oral sex from 16, very, very secretly and petrified of getting caught.
And when did you start going out to the different bars and gay clubs and stuff like that?
I didn't ever go into a gay bar until after I graduated high school and I moved out from home because I was like, I can't take it anymore. I can't keep sneaking around. So at 18, I had a job at Eastman Kodak, which for those millennials and ex-gen kids that don't know what Eastman Kodak is, it was a company that made cameras and film and did film processing, and they were one of the largest companies.
Was that your first job?
That was my first job. I started in accounts receivable after school, part-time, and then when I graduated, I started working full-time in the daytime. And so now I had a little bit of money. I had a little studio apartment, and I started, because I was on my own on the weekends, if I was able to not have to go to synagogue with my parents, which was by an excuse,
right,
I would get dressed thinking I, knew what I was doing, and I really had no clue what I was doing. I mean, we're talking blue eyeshadow, red lipstick, no liner, my mom's wig that looked really, really bad that I had taken from her, really poor clothing, but I felt great. So I kind of was very shy, but I still decided I was going to get on the subway and I was going to go into Manhattan and I was going to explore.
In drag?
And so I would go in drag. I would go in and I would not talk to anybody, but I'd kind of, feel my way around and listen to the music and see people. And then I would get sketched and I would get on the subway and go back home. So once
you wouldn't get clocked. I mean, because
of course.
You would?
No, no, no.
No. When I first met you, this was late night. I want to say,
Late 90s.
yeah, the late 90s. Um,
Voodoo, yeah.
someone that was with me asked me, what is she doing here? And I said, well, I the same thing you and I are doing. And that was my answer. And and then he asked me, my friend Brandon at the time, he said, but is that a lady? And I said, I don't know. I guess she is. I mean, you always have been unclockable. So that's why I asked
I've
that
always
question, because I
gotten
can
it.
just imagine, because you're so petite and so, so soft, that during that time you'll go unclocked around the city.
I used to get the question all the time in the bars, why are you, what I would get the question, why are you in a drag show? Or I would get the question, are you someone's mom, someone's sister? I always got that. And that to me was such a compliment to have gotten that even before my transition.
How
It
was
was
how
so
was that
amazing.
interest? What sparked it? Like, was that always in you, or this is something that developed because of
It
something?
it definitely was always in me because I always felt that I was a girl. I just didn't understand it because of the world I lived in and the environment I was in. But as I got into my teen years, we didn't have internet and we didn't have the, drag mothers and people to help us and teach us. But I would read magazines and I would see Audrey Hepburn and I would see Jackie Kennedy and I would look at the fashion magazines and see these models that were just beautiful. And that's how I learned how to do makeup. And that's how I learned to dress and how I wanted to look. And I sounded like a girl and I was very petite. I mean, I was a size 0 or 2 most of those years. And so I fit the mold and I just felt so good, but I was very shy and I was very, very afraid. But when I put on my face and I started going out, I started to feel a confidence about myself. And people would look at me and talk to me and not call me a sissy or a fag or I wouldn't get bullied. So it built a confidence that I loved and I just wanted to keep doing it.
Now, your intent was never to be a showgirl or do shows or anything like that. How come?
Because of my upbringing and because of the strict nature of how I grew up, I always wanted to make sure that I pleased my parents. And I always wanted to make sure I had a career and my own money because I knew that I couldn't go to my parents for money. I knew I couldn't live with my parents because I had basically sinned and moved out. Because in our religion, you're supposed to stay with your parents until you get married, then have a home with a female. And same with the girls when they get married. So because I left home and became independent and I was in what you would consider the secular world, I knew I had to depend on myself to survive. I knew I had to make my own money to go to college, to have an apartment, to survive. And of course, the only way I could do these things was to make sure that I built a career and became successful. And I knew in the back of my mind that that might just help me with my parents' acceptance. And of course, I was afraid to tell them anything. And I just knew that if I did tell them, I would be disassociated from the family. And I just didn't want that, but I didn't have the courage to tell them. So because of that, I really didn't know what a showgirl was. And I really wasn't confident enough in myself or my abilities to be in the spotlight. I didn't think I would ever have the courage or the guts to be in the spotlight. So I always just stayed in the background and stayed very quiet, but I absorbed and I became a sponge. And by being a sponge, things just got better and better for me.
Now, the
So,
name the name Alyson Thomas, how did this come about and when did this come about?
well, Marlo Thomas, the daughter of Danny Thomas, had a television show called That Girl. And I thought that I looked like Marlo Thomas, and I thought she was everything, because here's a girl who leaves home from a small town in upstate New York, Brewster, and moves to Manhattan and has a little apartment and gets a job and has a boyfriend, and all she wanted to do was be an actress. And the sitcom ran for many years. So I decided that I wanted my last name to be Thomas. And I had heard this girl's name, Cindy, on a soap opera. So I became Cindy Thomas. That was the name I chose myself. In 1978 or 79, I was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was going into a bar, petrified, and I was in the parking lot. And I get out of my car, and there is a drag queen who I thought was a woman getting out of her car, and she looked dead straight at me. And she said to me, "You look like an Alyson." And she came over to me and struck up a conversation. And I'm thinking, Alyson Thomas. Well, the drag queen was none other than my dear friend, Lady Chablis. And she introduced herself to me as Dale Knox. And she said, "I'm Lady Chablis." And we became friends. She took a liking to me. We talked all the time. She gave me tips. She continued to share stories with me, and she kind of helped me. She introduced me to a lot of other queens at that time. And one of the queens that I saw when I met Chablis was Heather Fontaine. And when I saw Heather, I'm like, this is everything I want to be. Heather was so beautiful.
So beautiful.
And so natural and so amazing and so talented. And the first thing I ever saw Heather do was City Lights. So, of course, when I got home, I had to find City Lights. And back then you had to buy, vinyl, or you had to find a reel from somebody to get the music. So I just had to figure out how Heather did what she did. And of course, I had no clue about, real hair or hormones or silicone or anything. I didn't understand how these girls looked so feminine, but I always thought I was feminine. That's because I was just very small. So I would watch these girls, and I could list 100 queens that all of us know. And I was very fortunate, and I'm still very fortunate in my life to have crossed paths with so many amazing, wonderful entertainers.
Now, Alyson, I want to ask you, because during this time, you had a career. You had graduated, you had a career, you had your set life, you had a good job, and you were still living, this two lives.
Correct.
You were being something in the morning, and then you were being something at night. Everyone in the industry knew you as Alyson Thomas, and you kept that very separate. Those two entities, very separate. Explain to me, how difficult was this for you?
Well, I never felt that I could find the courage to transition in it, and it took me many years to understand what transitioning meant. I had a friend, another queen by the name of Peaches Burke. Peaches was a Black queen who was very, very, very outgoing. And she took me under her wing, and she said to me, "You can be a boy in the daytime, but you need to be who you want to be in the nighttime." And back in those days, it was illegal to wear women's clothing and be out in the street. You could get arrested. And Peaches told me to go to a social worker, which I did. And I had a letter that I carried with me when I went out in drag, which basically said, "I was undergoing sex reassignment surgery. Please give this person every consideration. They're required to live as a female for 1 year." Of course, I had no intention of sex reassignment surgery. It wasn't for me. I didn't understand it. But I had to live as a boy in the daytime because of my parents. There was no way I could open up to my parents or my siblings and tell them my truth because I would be rejected.
How
I
did
just
you
didn't
how
believe.
did you end up in the Carolinas?
Well, when I started going to college, I moved to Atlanta and I went to Georgia State University, which is where I earned my bachelor's degree in accounting and my master's degree in information systems. When I was working and going to school at the same time, once I graduated, I was offered a job in a real estate company, which was in the Carolinas. Oddly enough, at the same time that I moved to the Carolinas to work for this company, my parents retired from Brooklyn while all my relatives moved here to South Florida, as all Jews do. My parents wanted to go to the North Carolina mountains. They didn't want the heat. So my parents moved to Western North Carolina, and I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. So I was about an hour and a half away from them. So it was really good, but at the same time, I was really scared. I was like, oh my God, what if they want to come to my house? How am I going to, not have my friends around? I'm going to have to hide everything. So I worked in real estate from the from the mid 1980s until 2007 with the same company, but this company developed communities from concept to completion. And in that process, it caused me from the late 1980s until I moved here permanently to South Florida, I moved between North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. Every couple of years, I was constantly moving. I would move to Myrtle Beach. I would move back to Charlotte. I would move back to Myrtle Beach. It just continued because this was part of my job. But to answer your question, I worked as a boy, suit and tie, professional job in accounting, real estate accounting. But on the weekends, I could visit my parents, my sisters, or my parents could come to my home, but I had to hide everything. And I had to put on that, that brave face. And I never told anybody at work anything. I would just try to fit in, and I would still get called faggot a lot. And I just ignored it. But once the sun went down, I'd get the disco music on and a glass or two of wine. And I had some great friends, and we would get ready and go out to the bars.
How did you do? Because there's something that a lot of people do not know about you, is that you were actually married and you actually have a daughter and actually two grandchildren. I was fortunate enough to meet your daughter and your first grandchild at one point.
Yes.
But how did you do it? If you had to live this life, I mean, how was that? How did that work?
Well, this is the kiki of all kikis. So, my dear friend Carmela Marcela Garcia, George Timothy Reed, was the one person who I opened up to about all of this. A lot of people know the relationship I had with Mela. We were very close, but Mela was one person who always told me, no matter what you're going through, pick up the phone. We can laugh, we can cry, we can have silence and just know that we're together. When she moved to Kentucky, she opened her home to me. I opened my home to her. She was one person I felt comfortable telling everything to. And Mela knew everything about me. So while I was working in an office in North Carolina, this girl came to work. Her name was Angela. And she fell madly in love with me. Now, she would come by my desk and ask me to go have coffee. She would invite me to lunch, and I would always just blow her off. I'm like, no, I'm not interested. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God. Well, she continued to stalk me for many, many months. Flowers on my desk, candy on my desk, love notes, cards. And we became friends. But I'm like, I could never tell her. I can't tell her I'm gay. I can't open up. I always thought, oh my God, what if somebody at work finds out? What if my parents find out? So we had gone on a business trip I didn't know she was going on the trip that I was going on. And one night, one thing led to another. And literally 3 or 4 months later, we were engaged and we had a big Jewish wedding, which made my parents very proud. And I said to myself, okay, I can do this. I'm doing this for my parents. And after we got married, lo and behold, I now had to have sex. We didn't have sex until we were married. And I'm like, I can't do this. I'm going to be sick. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to be sick. Well, I finally said to her on our honeymoon, I'm a virgin. I've never had sex. Of course, I wasn't going to say I had boy sex, male sex, gay sex. She goes, I'm a virgin too, so let's learn this together. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to be able to do this. There's no way. Well, it's surprising what you tell your mind you can do. And she was so good to me, and she loved me so much, and she had such a big heart that we did it. We got married. After our honeymoon, we just started basically a normal life. I put the drag away completely. I didn't do any drag for a number of years. I tried to live the straight life. I tried to please my parents. My parents were elated. They were so happy. Of course, I knew in the back of my mind, I'm lying to her. I'm lying to myself. Well, then she ends up pregnant. And as you said, you've met my wonderful daughter, Alexandra, who is now 32. And she's a registered nurse, and she's happily married with 2 beautiful children. My granddaughter, Mackenzie, my grandson, Carmine. My daughter and I have an amazing relationship. She knows everything about me. When she was 2 years old, her mother and I moved to Brisbane, Australia. The company I was working with, the owner of the company's cousin, he was doing the same thing we were doing, but in Australia. And he made an offer to me I couldn't refuse. So here I go, pack everything up, take my wife and my little daughter, and we moved to Brisbane, Australia for 2 years on a work visa. And while I was in Australia, I had the opportunity to travel by myself on weekends. Well, I had that little bit of drag itch going on. So one of my business trips, I was away for 4 days. And during that period of 4 days, Alyson came out. And I went to a bar. And when I got back to my home, I basically had a trunk with a lock on it where I kept my drag and some pictures and some things like lube and things that, straight people don't even know about, poppers. Well, one day I came home from work and she had broken into the trunk and found it. So I was devastated, absolutely devastated. And I'm like, I have to be honest with you. You've been amazing and wonderful, but remember how hard you stalked me to marry you and how you would not take no for an answer, but I could never tell you the other side of me. So we ended up coming back to the States after the contract ended. It was very difficult. She ended up leaving me. We got divorced. But I always knew I had a responsibility to my daughter. She also made it very difficult for me with child support and trying to sue me for the money I made in Australia, which was a considerable amount of money, because she felt that she was there on deceptive terms. So we got divorced. It was very ugly for a number of years, but I had joint custody. So every weekend I would pick up my daughter and spend the weekend with her. But then I had to move to Myrtle Beach, which was 6 hours away from where my daughter was living with her mother. And Friday nights I would leave work, drive 6 hours, pick up my daughter, either go to my parents' house for the weekend or take her back to Myrtle and drive her back on Sunday. And I did that from the time she was in kindergarten until she was old enough and didn't want to spend weekends with me as much. But I opened up to my daughter. And when she was old enough to understand I told her why her mother and I got divorced. And a funny story about that, the movie Tu Wong Fu had come out. And I went to the theater with one of my friends and my daughter, and we watched Tu Wong Fu. And one day she's at home with her mother and she goes, "I'm a drag queen." And her mother looked at her and said, "Where did you get that from?" And she said, "My daddy took me to the movies." Well, needless to say, I can laugh about it today. But I have a tremendous relationship with my daughter, as you know. I have an amazing friendship with her mother. It took many years, took a lot of patience and prayer and meditation, but her mother and I have become great friends. We talk every single week. Her mother is completely accepting of me now. We actually share many, many stories. And things have really worked out for the best. I, of course, spent many years guilt trips about, lying to her and deceiving her. And of course, we had to tell my parents and her parents that we split because we just were not getting along. But the fact that we kept our very strong relationship with my daughter, I think it helped everybody accept the divorce. And of course, in my parents' mind, this was like the ultimate sin because the Hasidic Jews are totally against divorce, but they are more against, homosexuals.
Right.
So it was very difficult.
You had a horrible experience, about being gay bashed. Actually, it was very traumatic for you, and it changed you. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, after my divorce, I was living I had moved back in with my parents for a while. I had no available funds to be on my own because of the amount of money in the settlement to my ex-wife. Well, my company offered me, I'd come back to work for the same company that I had left for 2 years. My company had moved me to Myrtle Beach, and I was going to Charleston, South Carolina for a booking. And the night before the booking, I decided I was going to go check out a bar in drag and just have a drink and relax and unwind and go back to my hotel. Well, when I got to the bar, I met two very beautiful boys. I couldn't resist, and I made the terrible mistake of taking them back to the hotel with me. But I thought we were going back to have a three-way, but they had other things in mind. They were straight, just like I liked them, but they decided that they were going to basically kill me. I got beat with a wooden chair over the head. I got kicked. I got punched. I was left unconscious. They stole my car. They stole my money. They stole my wallet, my keys, everything. And the hotel security found me unconscious on the floor. I woke up in the hospital in Charleston. I had no idea what had happened. I don't know how they reached my sister, but somehow the hospital reached my oldest sister. I have no clue how. And my sister came from where she lived about 7 hours, picked me up, and brought me home. It took me 3 to 5 months to recover. I had 700 plus stitches in my head. They basically had just beat my skull. I mean, there was nothing left. The doctors say it was a miracle I survived without brain damage. And of course, that was a wake-up call for me that drag is dangerous. And I also learned back then that it wasn't safe to go to a motel with a boy unless you tell him the truth, which that became my motto from that point forward, is that I would never go with anybody unless they knew that I wasn't female. So it was quite a traumatic experience.
How did you get the nickname Mama Bear?
The nickname Mama Bear. Well, in the late 90s, I was in Orlando for a number of months working, and Carmela and I were talking, and I told her I was going to Miami for a business trip. And she said, "You have to stop at this bar called the Boardwalk and meet Victor Zepka, the owner." So I get to Miami, I go to Sunny Isles, I find the Boardwalk, I see the police station, and I'm like, oh my God, where am I going? But I go into Boardwalk, and Annie's at the door, and Valentina's the hostess. And she's sitting at that counter right in the front with the microphone and her paper. And I walk in. And as my friend Francina says, I used to wear every piece of jewelry I owned because I didn't have the best fashion sense. Of course, being from the Carolinas and I'm in Miami, I knew nothing that was going on. So I walk in and Valentina starts talking to me and I tell her about Carmela and so on and so on. Well, as you know the story, and many others do, Valentina just adopted me. And everywhere we went from 97, 98 until Voodoo opened, and then from that day forward, she nicknamed me Mama Bear. And it was so appropriate because all of you, all of my chosen family, call me Mama Bear. And amazingly enough, it's so comforting to me because I feel like I give from the heart and I'm always there to help anybody. And I've always been that way. So that the nickname really just molded me into Mama Bear. And it's
You
just
know,
resonated my whole life.
yes, it does. It's funny that you talk about Francina. She's one of your best friends and one of the first people that you actually met when you came down here to Miami. And I actually have a very short message that she wanted to share with us today about you. Let's hear.
Okay.
What can I say about Alyson Thomas? Alyson Thomas came into my life in the mid 90s. I saw her for the very first time in the original Boardwalk, and from that moment on, we were friends. She has been my mentor, my friend, my savior. I don't know what I would do without that woman after my mother passed away. She made my dream of being part of Miss Florida come true, and I'm so happy for her to be my friend.
Oh, Francine and I have become extremely close since Lola's passing. And literally, she says I'm her savior and mentor. She's also mine because the only two people I have seen through the pandemic, aside from people at work, are Francina and Noreen. And we truly are the three musketeers. So it really shows your chosen family is so important, but you don't take the time to know who they really are. That's why this platform that you have is so amazing and so important for everybody, because it truly helps all of us know about each other, because we're always talking about the bars and pageants and fashion and music, but we don't think about that there's a person inside.
Right. Yeah, and
So
that was the goal. It's funny because there was somebody that asked me, if I was getting paid. This was about 2-3 days ago. They're like, well, you should because it's work, and I said, yes, it's work, but at the same time, I feel that now it has become more than that. It has become more than I started this just to kill my time and to have
right,
conversations. And it became something else because of the engagement of so many people around us and from our community across the nation wanting to share ideas, thoughts, their own stories, their experiences, and enjoy them. And I think we elevate. I always say it, we elevate each other's character, not only as an entertainer but as a person when we know about each other. We tend to do that, to elevate each other. But it's our time now to talk about pageantry and to talk about a little bit of faggotry.
okay, the best subject of the night.
Absolutely. You are one of the most decorated, or if not the most decorated, Continental prelim owners. How did you get involved into Continental, which became your passion, your dream, your everything?
I can never imagine my life without the Continental family. In 1998, very dear friend of mine, Brooklyn Dior, in Charlotte, North Carolina, who I know you've met. She's been to my pageants. Brooklyn worked at Scorpio, and Brooklyn had her own show on Sunday nights. Brooklyn and I became soulmates. And one day, Brooklyn is reading a magazine. You remember our dear friend, Miss Della,
Yes.
who had her column about pageants. And there was an ad in Della's article about preliminaries for the Continental Pageant System. And to backtrack for just a moment, Amber Richards was one of my heartstrings. And the first time I went to Continental was when Amber won at the Park West in 1992. But I was way too shy to talk to anybody. I sat in the audience. I watched the pageant. It was the first time I ever saw Chanel Dupree, which, you know, has also become a tremendous part of my life. And when Amber won, I saw the emotion in her heart, and it just touched me in such a special way. And interestingly enough, Amber died on my birthday, so that made it even more special to me, the connection I had with her. So Brooklyn tells me about prelims for sale. I call Mr. Flint, and I tell Mr. Flint about me and who I am and where I live and what I do. And a few months later, I had North Carolina Continental and Continental Plus. My first year of my prelims, Danielle Hunter won my prelim and Ivy White won my plus. We went to Chicago the following September. Danielle won Continental. So I started with a bang. And, you know, Danielle's my heart. She's my missing Gabor sister. She's someone I've always looked up to, her beauty, her style, her courage. So leaving Continental, my first experience with a winner, just really just put the pageant in my heart. And as many people know, my prelims, I brought everybody. I brought Cezanne, I brought Monica, I brought Mimi. I had, 10 Continentals at my pageants. And you've been part of many of my prelims. I always made my prelims the best prelim that could be. Ended up winning 13 prelim awards. For 20 years, I never missed a single pageant. When Mr. and Elite came out, I immediately bought prelims. I ended up having 4 North Carolina prelims and 4 South Carolina prelims. I held my pageants at Scorpio, and I held my pageants at Time Out in Myrtle Beach. Once I moved to South Florida, I continued to have my prelims, but I was noticing all of my contestants came from Florida. They all drove to the Carolinas to compete. I remember all the great trips with Sasha Summers and with Danny and with TP and Gina, and everybody piled up in the cars and came to my prelims. And I was looking around, and all my contestants were from Florida. Even Lorna Vando came from Puerto Rico. So I'm like, So when I came to Florida, when I got to Discoteca, I'm like, I called Jimmy and I say, can I please move my pageants to Miami since all my contestants come to Miami? There's no prelim in Miami, but I still want to keep the name Carolina. So I combined North and South into just Carolina's Continental. And I always had my winner as North and my first runner-up as South. And I always brought 8 contestants to Continental every single pageant. For 20 years, I always had a top 12, top 5, or a winner. Carolina name was always represented on the video. I was one of the proudest people to sit at that promoter's table and be recognized. And every time I got a prelim award, it was just the most glorious thing in the world to receive a Jimmy, the trophy, and the friendship that I built from the beginning. The first person to embrace me was Ginger Grant, Tim Gideon. Tim took care of every detail for me whenever I called. I just got the best family out of Continental. I've made some great friends. Every entertainer that has come through Continental, I feel like I've known or I've been part of their life in some way. I've sponsored and I've helped so many of them. And it's just the greatest feeling ever.
You know, you had many winners as well, you know, representing your pageants. And I know that there's one significant one that was, I guess, pretty recent, we could say, where you guys made a great connection and still share a beautiful bond, and that was Alexis Gabrielle Sherrington.
Absolutely.
And that year was glorious for you because
Absolutely.
the way that that Gabby represented the pageant, the title, and how she just took over Chicago that year was just amazing. You know,
Yes.
eventually Miss Florida became yours, you know, and we share this love for Miss Florida and the Miss Floridas, I would say, that you and I share, that is so deep into and embedded into our hearts that we just we talked about it many times before you became the CEO, that something needed to happen to be able to bring back the system. And eventually, after giving it a lot of thought and having a lot of conversations, you decided to take over. How did this come about?
Well, you know, everybody knows that the old Miss Floridas were all Miss Continentals, and a lot of Miss Continentals were Miss Floridas. There was always that bond between the two pageants. And I had such a tremendous love for Heather, Tiffany Ariagas, and Tiffany Middlesex, and Nikki Adams, and Electra, Dana Douglas, Dana Manchester, Esme, Lakeisha, Amy, and then, of course, you know, Danielle. So I just felt like I had to do something to keep the legacy going. Tiffany Ariagas, this is a story a lot of people don't know. When Tiffany Ariagas was Miss Florida in 1978, she was preparing for Miss Universe for her give up. She was the first queen I ever sponsored. I gave her $200 for Miss Universe. That was all the money I had in the bank. But when I saw MacArthur's Park, it was everything to me. And I formed my friendship with Tiffany. That's how far back we go. When the Miss Florida was dormant, I had to do something. Victor was not letting go. I knew the legacy of Renee Rodriguez and Renee's in Tampa, and I knew the stories of Keith Landon that I had heard, and the girls were so important to me. And I approached Victor and I said, I'm doing Miss Florida with or without your blessing, but I'd much rather be able to take over the original Miss Florida, the corporation that was started at the beginning. And after a lot of arguments and conversations, Victor finally came around and said, there's no one better qualified or with more love in their heart for Miss Florida than Alyson. And he finally conceded, and we came to terms, and we worked out a business deal. And of course, Miss Florida wouldn't be Miss Florida without Gary Santis, and without the knowledge and common sense and marketing skills of Mr. Scott Holland, who's my very dear Jewish friend, brother. It wasn't gonna be a one-person deal like my Continental prelims. It was a much bigger undertaking. And as you know, with all the controversy in Miss Florida, you can never please everybody. But once we started our first year with Brittany Moore, it was just everybody was so happy. And when I saw, you know, Geraldine and Noreen and Ty Nolan and Bob Taylor and all these people that have been part of the system from the beginning, it was such an inspiration to me to say, Mama Bear is helping this come back. No matter what it turns out to be, I made it my passion, the same as Continental. And I said, I'm going to do both. There's such an interaction between Continental and Miss Florida. I'm going to find a way. And as you know, because you've been there with me from the beginning, I put everything I had, my heart, my soul, my mind, my body, and my bank accounts into these pageants and into the love for the dream of the girls that entered and now the boys that have entered.
I wanna be because we're running out of time, and I want to make sure that we get at least two of the questions that I have for you. But I want to make sure that on this topic, I have the need to mention that a lot of people do not know, but there were times where you had to make decisions about either sustaining your personal life or sustaining the pageants, and you chose the pageants. And the reason why you chose the pageants was not because of anything else but the girls, what it embodied for them, what it meant for them, and the dreams of so many others that helped it grow, and the dreams of so many others that still see the Miss Florida as that milestone, um, to be a part of. So I personally have always admired you for that. Um, you and I, like I mentioned before, have had years of closeness, years of friendships, tears, screams, arguments, laughs, love, all of the emotions together. And we'll be able to connect in ways that that not a lot of people are able to say.
That's
But
right.
I do know that your main love is not the pageant itself, but the love for the people that represent it. So I want to
That's
thank
right.
you for that, because I
Thank
know that you
you.
genuinely care, you genuinely love, and I just had the need to be able to highlight that. And I'm not the only
Thank
one.
you.
I'm not the only one. I spoke to Stasha Sanchez earlier today, as I mentioned to you earlier, and she sends her regards and her love, just as Alexis Gabriel Sherrington and so many others. You say Mama Bear, and there's a lot of people that share their love and their sympathy for you. So, talking
Thank
about the
you.
controversies of Miss Florida, I want to know, about, there's a lot, there's been a lot of drama and a lot of hearsay and a lot of things. And I know that um, you've come forward and you put clear statements out about any controversies that have aroused in the past. But what are the future plans for the Miss Florida pageantry system?
Well, as you know, a lot of controversy has always stemmed around Miss Florida, and it's impossible to please the world. No matter how hard you try, somebody has something to say, but nobody really understands what it costs to put on an event in a hotel ballroom. Nobody understands the amount of preparation that goes into it. Without your help through your amazing event business, we would not have been able to do what we've done. That's the truth. And I always thank you for that. You're just amazing. We were supposed to have Miss Florida July 13th. The date has been set since December, when we had Miss Florida Supreme, Mr. Florida, Miss Florida at Large. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, not only did we have to cancel the pageant, but we can't even set a date because there's too many unknowns and uncertainties. And it's very difficult to anticipate when we will return, because this happened before we had a chance to do prelims this year, or to get contestants, or for contestants that had already qualified to prepare because of money and the ability that they don't have work, they don't have the funds to do it. So as soon as the pandemic clears up and things return to some normal, whether it's a new normal or the old normal, Scott and Gary and I and you will sit down and come up with a new date, and when we will hold all four pageants, and what we're going to do about contestants. It's always been my position that with Miss Florida, that the original Miss Floridas and Miss Florida at Large, they're all getting older. They're all in their 70s, like me, and they're all, getting to the point where they are retiring, or they don't have the ability to travel as much. It's very important to me to keep their legacy alive. It's very important for me to know that our platform shows everybody in the country and the world how we got to where we are today. There's so many people that have no clue who these amazing performers are and entertainers are. They only know the bar performers, and today they only know the new girls, the new generation. But my generation are the ones who created pageantry and brought it to the level it's on. So Miss Florida will be a part of me till my last breath. And I know that the love of the people I surround myself with, my chosen family, feel the same way. So I know it will continue for a long time. So as soon as we're able to set dates, we will move forward. And I certainly hope that everybody that loves Miss Florida as much as I do and you do will support us and be part of it, and that we can find the amazing new generation to come in and be part of the family. I was so happy with the return of Miss Florida that we were able to, have people like Brittany and Chastity and Kala and Giselle and Chantel and now Kylie to represent the new generation. And I have so much love for all of them. The same as right now when I look at Kimberly, our Miss Florida at large, and I see her spark and her energy and her willingness to learn. She's a sponge. To have you represent us as Mr. Florida is just an honor, because you're such an amazing performer and such a great, deep, humble person. And to have had Antonio and Jose and Carlos in that position and to create that brand is so important. And I couldn't be happier that I have Erica Norell and Dana Douglas as our Supremes. Because, I've always said, I have to say it for the record, when I grow up, I want to be Erica Norell. These girls mean the world to me. They are my sisters, they're my family, but it's my chosen family, something I didn't have growing up and never could embrace. So to embrace my Continental family and my Miss Florida family, and also my AAG family, because there's a lot of AAG that I just love and adore, it is the best feeling in the world. And I always connect to people that I knew 20, 30 years ago when I run into them. And when I look at some of these girls that have now grown up, like Cassandra Hilton and Kimberly Gist, Brandana Dupree-Larice, I knew them when they were kids, just starting. And to see them now in the pageant years, it's phenomenal to me. When I see the growth of Chantel and Giselle, it brings greatness to my heart. When I look at people like Courtney Paychan Wales, Fancy Vega, she inspires me every single day to be better, because she is so strong. And the battles she fought and the addictions she fought touch me. And I always want to be that person that's there for everyone any way I can. And I just know in my heart how much I brought to these pageants and how many dreams I fulfilled for people, but they didn't realize I was fulfilling my own dream at the same time. And I mean, it just keeps growing.
I want you to know that those efforts that you have made throughout the years, all the finances that you have put towards these pageantries and all these contestants, and also, letting your own personal interest, be secondary to the interests of other people, do not go overlooked. There are a few who might overlook them, but the majority do not. And we appreciate everything that you do, not only for the community itself, but also for each person. There's a point to be made about pageantry, and I always say it because our community is very, many times we like to just divide and make sure that we judge a lot and we divide a lot. But when it comes to pageantry, I've heard many times, I don't support that pageant because of this. I don't support that pageant because of that. I don't go to that pageant because I'm not, I'm not fond of, etc. All these excuses. But what we're not seeing is that pageantry is the basis. It's our thing. It's the one thing, while we're asking for so much equality from the world, it's the one thing that we hold as our own. It's our own genuine, unique statement to be made, because that's not equal to anybody else. It's ours. So
Right.
I support every single system out there, and I appreciate every single contestant, reigning and former, out there, because it's part of that legacy that we talk about, of
That's right.
just keeping our community alive with something
That's
that
right.
means our own. It's our own identity. So when it comes to, I'm gonna have to plug my little commercial here. When it comes to Miss Florida, sometimes, I feel very happy about the turnouts, but many times I feel like we do not get the full support as we should, because
Right.
because we're part of that family. And not only are
Right.
we part of that pageantry family, but we're part of a legacy that dates far more than 40 years. So it's a call, to be mindful, and to make sure that we take that into consideration when we say things like we don't support here, we don't support there, because at the end of the day, it's the contestant that puts their money there, it's the promoters, it's the sponsors, and it's all a community that helps these people to keep this alive. So
I always say when it comes to Miss Florida, and no different, it's Continental, it's not about buying the ticket or watching the pageant. It's about the history. When I see our Miss Floridas, old or new, walk that stage, it brings joy to my heart. That's what I want the new generation to learn and to understand, that the money I put in, the money we put in, the money ticket sales go to, none of it comes back to me. I always put out, but it's always for the love of the art form. And it's a dying art form, and it's changing so much because of mainstream America today. But we know where it started. And I made a commitment to the old Miss Floridas a long time ago. And they all know in all divisions how much every single one of them mean to me, and how hurt I get when they're not able to come or they don't come. But inside in my heart, I know they're there with me. And I know that Renee and Keith are there with me as well. And all the people that are no longer with us. That's what's so important to me. And it's important that everybody know and understand that all the pageants are the same. Even the new pageants, they had to start somewhere, but it started with somebody's dream.
right.
And although there's disappointment and heartbreak and controversy, in the end, there can only be one winner. And whether we agree or disagree, we have to trust our judges. And one thing about Miss Florida, and one thing about my name being attached to anything, that's honesty and loyalty to the system. Whether I agree or disagree with the winner, whatever is handed to me by the judges is what is announced. And if I in my to myself say that person didn't win, I wasn't the judge. How many pageants have I judged? How much controversy have I had as a judge? I've judged every pageant pretty much all over the country. And how much controversy is there? But I always say I love and support everyone. And I sure hope that all of our community embrace pageantry going forward, because it's something we as LGBTQ community need to have in our lives.
Right.
It is
It's
our
it's our
outlet,
own.
it's our outlet.
It's our own. It's our own unique thing. Before I ask you our last questions, because we're completely out of time, Mama Bear, it's been lovely to have you. I want to make a
Thank
few
you.
plugins about the Boom Boom Room on Wednesday nights with my girl Chevelle Brooks. She has amazing interviews. Amazing interviews. She gets down deep and personal with the guests that she has on her show, and that's on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Central Time, which means 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have my auntie Desiree De Mornay with her shows on Tuesdays and at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 10 p.m. Our time, and Saturdays 5 p.m. Pacific and 8 p.m. Eastern. If you haven't checked out Sunday Delights live feed hair sale on Saturdays at 1 p.m., I always watch it. I don't even buy hair, which I should because I'm bald. But I don't buy hair for myself. But I just love to watch her. She's so professional in the way that she does, and she presents her product that I just love her. And if you and every single comment that I get, from her products are just amazing. And of course, an evening with Stasha Sanchez. That's on Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll be watching her. I'll be going back and forth between Desiree and Stasha because they're at the same time tonight. I want to show you this little picture that I found. Actually, Scott Holland sent this to me when we were both reigning Noche Latina some time
That
ago.
was
I
a
don't
great
even,
year.
2000 and something. I don't remember what year
12.
was that.
12.
2012. So we go way back since the late 90s of that.
Yes,
We
we
have a lot of
did.
history. I wanna
You'll
I
always
wanna
be my Vegas.
thank you. You'll always be Mama Bear.
That's
I
right.
wanna ask you one final question, and with this we'll close the interview. How would you, Mama Bear, like us to remember you by?
I think you said it best when you said I always put everyone before me. I love the fact that I've been called the $1 Million Lady, but more, I love the fact that I've been called Mama Bear. So everybody has a story about their mother or their father. And I just want every person in our community to know that I want to be remembered as Mama Bear, and that my heart is with each and every one of you every single day. There's not a night that goes by that I don't pray for all the girls in our community to be safe and to have lost as many people as we've lost in the recent years and recent months, and to see how many of our beloved sisters right now are going through COVID. It's very important that we remember that we're human first and that we have to forgive. We don't have to forget, but we have to forgive, and we have to embrace each other with one thing, and that's unity. That's how I want to be remembered, that I love everyone equally, and I always will.
And I know that you will. And trust me, we love you too. And like I said, you're not overlooked, and all your efforts are still very fresh on a lot of people's minds. And I don't speak for myself, but I'm certain that I speak for a lot of people. I want to thank you for opening up, having this conversation with me. I know it's your first time doing so, and I know that everybody that has been watching has appreciated, your bravery, your openness, and your honesty. And I love you very, very much.
Thank you, Vegas. I love you as well, my dear.
I'm gonna call you after this interview, and we're gonna chat a little bit, see how you felt.
Okay, honey.
I'll talk to you soon. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. I want to make sure that you know that tomorrow I have the artist himself, Christopher Iman, a 7-time national title holder who has taken the South by a storm. And on Thursday, I have the one and only, the queen, the body, the beautiful Stasha Sanchez. She'll be here. Just being her. You just gotta watch. It's gonna be a great conversation with both of them. They have great stories, and I can't wait for all of you to hear it. For tonight, I want to thank you for tuning in for a different kind of talk, and I'll see you tomorrow at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Good night.